very, very quickly, we're going to rattle through the perspective as seen from European institutions. With this audience, I don't need to say more, I don't think, but we have Simon Usherwood on my right and Hussein Kassim on my left. And are you going to talk about different...
I'm just talking about the Council and the Commission, and then Simon's going to say something about Parliament.
OK, you go first.
Yeah. So we're going to be very, very brief. Much of what we say is in the guide, so I just sort of telegraph some of the key messages. I mean, I'm talking about the Council and the Commission. I'm taking them together, and we do this in the publication, and that's because they have worked closely together, despite the institutional rivalry that's been sort of reported, that was anticipated. There was actually a very, very strong commitment to producing a sort of common position. And that has has worked extremely well ever since the very start of this. In the spirit of the guide, I mean, what we, in the spirit of the booklet, what we've done is to look at the background to this as well. And in that context, the first point I would make is to say that there was shock, there was regret, but there wasn't surprise at the referendum result. There was preparedness for it. Lining up, clearing with the capitals of the EU 27, a yes message, and a message in the event of a victory for leave, a sort of series of principles that needed to be agreed in the event of leave, and that was done sort of 48 hours before the referendum took place. I would say, however, that, and we all know about the principles in this room, so I'm not going to go through that, so a sort of united approach taken to the negotiations. I would say, however, despite what earlier speakers have saying, and with all due respect to them, that the surprise has come, the shock, and even, I think, a trace of panic at what's come after. The lack of a clear UK line, bemusement at the ease with which it was easy for the 27 members of the EU to reach a position, the greater difficulty that's taken the UK cabinet to reach a position. Bemusement also at the failure to take the EU seriously, the reiterated message of unity, no cherry picking, that Barnier would be the EU chief negotiator, not a member of the Commission, representing the institutions. That's really important. A disappearance, I think, of traditional habits and practices that one had expected of the UK government in articulating a position, in singing from the same hymn sheet, all of things that were very, very familiar from London historically. But also the persistence, certainly in the meetings that I've had in the organisations on both sides of the road, of sort of cake and eat it thinking, of magical thinking. But I think that the panic in particular comes from the sort of the failure on the part of the government to prepare public opinion for the compromise that will inevitably need to take place. I think that's where the real anxiety seems to be taking place. Beyond and above all of that, there's a real determination on the part of both institutions to argue strongly in the European Commission President's words, that the EU is not Brexit. So in other words, to deal with it sensibly, to deal with it in a sort of structured set of arrangements, but not to let it overwhelm the EU, and in fact to find an opportunity in Brexit to further integration or other kinds of pursuit of other kinds of paths, other visions for the future.
Okay, Simon, so the Council and Commission have worked closely together. How's the Parliament? How's Brexit been for them?
Well, so far for the European Parliament, it's been on the bench a bit. I'm not sure I'm going to call it a super sub, but it's a player that at the moment I think has felt that it has an obvious role in the negotiations in regard to citizens' rights, which, as Lindsay was saying just before, has seen relatively more progress than other areas of the negotiations. So at this stage, the Parliament has not had to exercise its full power, and I think this is one of the things that has been largely sidelined in the discussion, is that the European Parliament will need to approve the Article 50 deal, and that comes and goes in the negotiations as to how much we need to keep the European Parliament on board. So the dynamic has been, again, one of close cooperation. The role of Guy Verhofstadt in the coordination with Donald Tusk and with member states has been relatively good. And I think that at the moment has not been a problem. But I think at this stage, one of the things we can see is that there is potential there for concern. And also, there's the issue that the Parliament itself is not easily controlled. It sometimes is taken with views that sit outside other people's preferences, should we put it that way. So it's really, I think, at this point, just to flag that uncertainty that sits around the Parliament, particularly if the discussions become more problematic and if we're not unable to unblock those issues around citizens' rights, which the Parliament has very clearly staked its colours to the mast on.